Hello. In the Crown of Aragon 639 years ago, it was March 2nd, 1387. My name is Jonathan Seyfried. I'm a PhD candidate in history at the University of New Mexico. And this is the Historian's Notebook, a podcast about how history gets made. Season 1 is titled Multcara Companiona. We're looking at a document from each day of the first year of the reign of King Joan I of Aragon and Queen Violante de Bar. Let's begin today's document. Today's document is a short letter from Joan to somebody he addresses as Marquis Carcosi. This is in the secret seal register. And remember, secret is a little bit of a false cognate here, because it's more of just like it's the private. I mean, it's secret in the sense that it's got a different level of protection. Like, it's not a document that just anybody can access. You'll have to have special permission to look at these later if you're wanting to consult them in the archive. But in this particular case, we have family correspondence, and that's usually where the secret seal comes in, when it's kind of family correspondence. That's what I'm noticing. It's not like the only things in the secret seal registers are family correspondence, but that's typically, here's what I'll say. It's rare to see a family letter, someone who's Joan or Violante are writing to, where it's a family relative, in something that's not the secret seal. And in the case of Violante, we've got that register called Varia, which I believe is actually composed of a bunch of different types of seals, but they were just getting organized with her chancery processes in the beginning of the reign, and so they hadn't yet set up the separate secret seal register, and so they dumped a lot of the early stuff of all kinds of different levels of seal into the register called Varia. Okay, so today's document is in the secret seal register for Joan. The addressee is Marquis Carcosi, that's in the first line, but then at the bottom of the document we have an expanded version of the addressee. And that reads, Marquis de Villena consanguines domini regis, I think is how we expand the end of that. So what it means, regardless of the exact Latin ending there, is that the person who is addressed by this letter is the Marquis of Villena. Consanguinis means relative. So you can see the word for blood in this, sanguine. So of a blood connection, consanguine, a relative of the Lord King. So this is a relative of the king who has the noble title of Marquis, which is below the level of a duke in the hierarchy of nobility titles in this realm. And somehow Joan considers him at the level of cousin. All right, did a little bit of research here on the Marquis de Villena. And what's also really helpful is that in the last sentence of the letter before the dating clause, and it's the second to the last line of the letter. There's a name, Don Alfonso vostra fi. So Alfonso, your son. Now, this gets really tricky because there was, in the lineage of the Marquis of Villena, there were two Alfonsos. There was an Alfonso the older and an Alfonso the younger. So is this person that's being addressed in this letter the father of Alfonso the elder, or is the addressee Alfonso the elder himself, and he has a son named Alfonso? So we have to kind of work out according to lifespans and dates in order to figure that out. And it's very clear that in 1387, this would be Alfonso the Elder as the recipient of this letter, as the addressee. And Alfonso vostra fi is Alfonso the Younger. Okay. The Marquis de Villena, in this letter, he has been very active in a lot of battle campaigns and such that I am just not going to get into the weeds about. But the part of this that really caught my attention and got me excited when I saw it was that he, the addressee of this letter, is the grandfather of somebody who is very important in understanding the cultural efflorescence of the reign of Joan and Violante. The grandson, so the son of Alfonso the Younger, right? The grandson of Alfonso the Elder. His name is Enrique. Enrique de Villena was a writer of several different treatises. One of them, weirdly, was called The Art of the Scissors, in which he wrote this whole book about the correct way to cut meat. It's so weird. It's like really, like, could write a whole book about that? Yes. And it's and to say The Art of the Scissors is a little bit of a mistranslation, but it's sort of like that. I mean, it's the art of the cutting. All right. So anyway, that is a little interesting sort of factoid about Enrique de Villena. But way more important is that, alas, these Alfonsos die, and Enrique is left as an orphan. Okay, wait a second. Hold on, I got that wrong. Wait a second. Alfonso the Younger dies, and that was Enrique's father. And Enrique is raised by his grandfather for a little while, but then his grandfather does die. And at that moment, around then, is when he gets shipped off to live in Barcelona, and Violante is actually involved in getting Enrique de Villena to have a lot of time in Barcelona during his childhood. He grows up witnessing the big Troubadour competition that takes place in 1391. Oh gosh, and then I think it happens a second time in 1393. The initial Jeux Florals, the Game of Flowers. And that is a troubadour competition based on something that had been happening in Toulouse that Joan decided to import into the Crown of Aragon. And it's Enrique de Villena who writes down some of what the procedures were. And so it's actually the earliest record that we have of what the troubadour competition was like and what some of the rules were like. So I got really excited when I saw Marquis de Villena because of that larger connection. So, what is this letter about? Really focused on the identity of the recipient and the place of this letter in the longer story of Joan's cultural efflorescence, along, of course, with Violante, who was like the key to having that cultural efflorescence. Because remember, he's importing this stuff from France. So, anyway, Joan gets credit for the Jacques Florals, but it must have been both Joan and Violante together. And now we have Shadow back to put her contribution into this. Okay, what's going on in this letter? What's going on in this letter is that Joan is demanding that the Marquis de Villena comes to Barcelona. It seemed that there had been... Hey, come on. It seemed that there had been some kind of injury or condition that had prevented the Marquis de Villena from coming to Barcelona, and Joan is saying, okay, you're well enough now, so you need to come show up, right? I'm summoning you. Sorry that you went through that difficult thing, but now you gotta come. And then he also says something interesting at the very end, that he has sent this messenger, Père Marche, to deliver that summons, but also to bring to Alfonso the Younger a designation to a chivalric order. So the last sentence of this letter before the dating clause reads, Tremetem vos per lo dit mosen per la creu de nostra empresa de Sant Jordi per a Don Alfonso vostra fi. That was kind of like a rhyme. It seemed like a little rhymey. What that means is that we have sent to you through our messenger, Sir Père Marche, we have sent to you the cross of our order of Saint George. San Jordi is Saint George. So Alfonso the Younger has been awarded admittance into this Cross of Saint George society or designation. It's just like an honor that the king bestows. And Joan got really into this, and later on the Order of the Cross of St. George dwindles. But at this time, Joan is trying to really build it up and have a bunch of really elite people in it. And I don't really have a ton of information about it. There is an article that Claude found that explains more about how Joan instituted these different chivalric orders. I think it's a little bit too in the weeds for my particular interest, but maybe not. I mean, I don't know. Could be something gendery in there. But in any event, the content of this letter is basically saying, hey, we know you couldn't come to Barcelona before, but now you need to. And by the way, I'm giving your son a pretty cool prize. All right. Couple things I want to point out about this letter in its more material aspects. First of all, if you're looking at the image, you can notice that the digitizers struggled with keeping the page open to the point where the margin could be captured by the photograph. So a lot of the words at the very right-hand side of the page are kind of squished, and I think the binding was just too tight to be able to get a good photo of this. So I just want to once again give a shout out to all of the people who worked to take photographs of these documents in this massive project that the Spanish government arranged in order to make these records from over 600 years ago available for anybody to see at any time. It's pretty amazing, and took a lot of work on the part of the staff of the digitizers. Okay, something else about this letter. Notice the handwriting. It's a little bit more, what do you want to say here? Flowy than we're used to. And there's certain scribes that just have a different kind of handwriting than what I would consider something more of the standard. It looks a little bit more rushed. And this scribe actually had 2 crossouts. So the first one is at the beginning of the second line. It looks like creencia is crossed out. And then, but I'm not even sure about that. The more clear strike through is in the 5th word of the 3rd line, when the scribe was going to write venguda and accidentally wrote vengad and saw, oh no, I put an A instead of a U. And so the scribe crossed that out and did venguda as a correction. So, a couple interesting moments in this letter to bring out some of the materiality of these documents as we're looking at them. Thanks for listening to this episode of The Historian's Notebook, Season 1, Molt Cara Companiona. If you are leaving with more questions than you arrived with, I have done my job. Remember, the motto of The Historian's Notebook is dissatisfaction guaranteed. Visit the website to see an image of today's document and additional show notes. And listen again tomorrow to hear about the next day in the first year of the reign of King Joan I of Aragon and Queen Violante de Bar. In the meantime, take care.